I recently finished reading Stephen King's book Danse Macabre, which is an early work by King. I think it was published in 1981. It's non-fiction, and it's basically Stephen King talking in very conversational tones about the horror genre in film, in fiction, and on TV. Talks about the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits and stuff, all kinds of things. Things he likes, things he doesn't like, things he thinks works, things he thinks don't work. It's a pretty good tool for someone aspiring to be a horror author, maybe. It is, of course, dated now, so you've only got works in there from prior to 1981. But that was kind of good because most of the works he references I've read, given that they are so old, because it was kind of a spoilery thing to read. Now, although it's written in very conversational tones, he weaves four archetypes, I suppose is the right word, although he refers to them as tarot cards, four tarot cards of the horror genre throughout the book. And they are these. The first one is the vampire. The second one is the werewolf. I'm having a brain fart. The werewolf. The third one is the thing without a name. And the fourth one is the bad place. And if you've seen the title of this video, you know we're going to be talking about the bad place. But let's work our way towards that. Yeah, this is probably going to be a longish video. So the vampire tarot card. Well, of course, we've got Bram Stoker's Dracula as the prime example of this. But loosely speaking, what he really means is the idea that the evil in the story is something outside of man. It's something other. And it's something that wants to devour you literally or harm you in some way. And I'm sure you can think of a lot of horror stories that fit that basic archetype, the vampire being the prime example. The supernatural creature who is not a person really, not a human being, who comes to kill you by drinking your blood, right? I think this is an archetype that Stephen King has visited many times in his own fiction. You could probably think of, I don't know if you've read Doomakey, but the thing in Doomakey is kind of like the vampire, but it's not a vampire really. Possibly Pennywise the Clown in It could be thought of as the vampire archetype. Okay, but it's the evil outside of man that wants to attack man. The second tarot card is the werewolf. And that's the opposite of that. It's the evil from within man. The evil that comes, and it's the transformation of man into the monster, right? So Jekyll and Hyde, for instance, that's the werewolf archetype. That's the one that interests me more, because it's more connected and grounded in real life, I think. Back in my Christian days, I think I've even mentioned this, but I used to sort of think of myself as Jekyll and Hyde, because you were reaching for an idealistic state of being that was not in keeping with human nature. So it created the Jekyll and Hyde difference within yourself, because you just couldn't live up to these things that you were being told to live up to. So for a while it would be fine, and then you turn into Mr. Hyde. Not literally, but you know, it's like you just couldn't live up to the things that you thought you were supposed to live up to as a human being. Anyway, I'm digressing a little, but so it's the werewolf archetype, right? The evil from within us that comes out to do wrong to others. The third one is the thing without a name. And that is based on fear of the unknown. The evil is something that can't be explained and that doesn't possibly make sense. Lovecraft was pretty well tuned into this sort of thing in his stories about monsters and madness, cosmic horror, that sort of thing. Yeah. If you ever feel like looking back in my videos and watching one called Don't Look in the Attic, which me and some friends made in 2005. I think it's a really well made movie. It'll take up half an hour of your time, and it's a great one to watch in front of kids, because, you know, kids and horror story, I say that because it's kind of family friendly in the sense that there's no bad language in that movie. There is no blood or anything, but it really taps into your fear of the unknown. It's basically about a woman living in a house who starts hearing things in the attic, and she investigates. Seriously, watch it. And if you've got kids, maybe not really young kids, it might scare them too much, and I'm being serious there. Don't look in the attic. Yeah. And we didn't know it at the time, but we were tuned into that particular horror archetype, the thing without a name. So there's something in the attic, right? It would be kind of a lame story if there wasn't, if it was just rats, you know? Unless they're mutant rats. But, you know, there was a thing that shouldn't be there, and it was there, and it was impossible for it to be there, and you didn't really understand what it was, and you never really got to see it fully. It's the thing without a name, and it's pretty good. It's a pretty good thing to use in a horror story to scare people with, right? Gosh, we're 6 minutes in. We haven't talked about the bad place yet. But listen, this is good stuff. At least I think it is. But the cool thing about the horror genre and kids is that, see, books don't really scare me. Horror books, horror movies, they don't generally scare me, right? Because I've got too big a grip on reality and what I think is possible and impossible within the bounds of reality. But a child, the brain of a child is more plastic, if that's the right word. It hasn't quite made up its mind about what's real and what's unreal, what's possible, what's impossible. And that's why things like this can scare the dickens out of a child. And that's why, you know, you can look across your room in the dark of the night, and in the sort of pale glow that you see things in, a pile of clothes sitting on a chair can be transformed into something grotesque in your mind. That's a phenomenon called pareidolia, if you want to look that up. We've all experienced it, you know. It can be seeing bunny rabbits in the clouds, or it can be seeing monsters lurking in the corner of your room. Pareidolia. Yeah, but anyway, enough about the thing without a name. We are on to the bad place. What we're really talking about here is the haunted house. But of course, Stephen King doesn't call it the haunted house because it doesn't have to be a house. It can be a haunted anything. It doesn't even have to be a traditional haunting. And this is the one that Stephen King explored first in his book The Shining, which is really about the place that has this debilitating effect on you. You know, we've all probably seen the Amityville Horror, right? Which is fiction, by the way, in case any of you don't know. I know it was kind of marketed like it wasn't fiction, but no, that's all came out. There's nothing sinister going on in the Amityville house, I'm afraid. But it uses the archetype of the bad place, right? So it could be a house infested with ghosts, or it could be the place itself. But it's the idea that localized geographically is this terrible place that has a really bad effect on you. And that has been used over and over in horror. Now, I want to tie this to something else. In my last video about books, I was doing a booktube tag. I forget the exact name of it. It was the horror something tag. Like it was, yeah. So, anyway, one of the questions was name a novel, or name a story, because it didn't have to be a novel. Name a story that isn't classed as horror, but you think it ought to be classed as horror. And when I racked my brains, I came up with Bret Easton Ellis's book Less Than Zero, which is all about 1980s alienated, disaffected, privileged young people living in Los Angeles, I think it was. And there was something very harrowing about that book, because you were just getting this portrait of the meaninglessness of their lives, the lack of love, not just being loved, but the lack of the ability to love. There was just something incredibly hollow and hard to read, hard to take, and I read it really fast because it was so difficult to read, but I knew I wanted to read it. You know, you ever experienced that kind of thing? And I got to thinking, well, why do I think of this as a horror novel? Well, clearly because I'm horrified by it. But it doesn't fit the traditional supernatural thing. Well, it doesn't have to. I mean, there's nothing supernatural about American Psycho, but pretty much everybody thinks of it as horror. But then I thought, American Psycho, what archetype does that fit? It's the werewolf, right? The werewolf. But what archetype does less than zero fit? And I got to thinking, it's the bad place. And the bad place is, at least this is the way I'm kind of fashioning it, it's the entire city of Los Angeles. And in that time period. And what makes it so scary is that it's not like a haunted city. And it's not like a supernaturally infected city that's sort of toxic to people. It's just the sort of group psyche, if you like, of the place. And I'm sure it's not localized to Los Angeles, but you know, that's a particular place in the United States with a particular culture, its own. What made it so scary is that it was just reality. There's nothing supernatural about it, and yet it's the bad place, right? It's not that the evil came out of these young people. It's that they were infected, really, by something other than themselves that they had no control over. And it basically got them from the cradle right on through. And just this debilitating effect. And I guess it's the nature versus nurture argument that I'm talking about here. And you know, where does evil come from? Nature versus nurture? Well, in American Psycho, it's definitely nature. Because he's bad through and through. Psychopathy is a unique position because it's a brain dysfunction. So it's definitely nature. But nurture plays a role too in evil, in that, you know, if you're born in a severely disadvantaged position, in a very toxic culture, those mitigating factors are going to shape your life, shape who you become, and you're not really going to be in control of it. And that's part of the horror, you're not really in control. So the bad place, you know. And then it got me thinking, well, that's fiction. You know, that's fiction, but what about real life? Have I ever encountered the bad place in real life? What's my bad place? And I got to thinking about the past, and the thing that struck me really was all the struggles I had with Christianity. How it first got its claws into me when I was a teenager, and the way I struggled with it for like the best part of 2 decades before I could disentangle myself from it entirely. And then I became this fierce critic of it. So the bad place, I mean, I'm just loosely thinking of it as the bad place. It permeates Western culture, Christianity, and of course it's localized in certain areas. When we join our little church subculture, it's localized to there, and that's where it really gets its grip on you. But some people love it, I guess. You know, some people love church and get a lot out of it. I did not have that experience. Well, I thought I did at the time, and that's part of the horror, is that you grow to love your own mental slavery. So it's not just Christianity was the bad place. I think, you know, the prevailing climate of atheism, at least in the pre-internet era, was also the bad place, because it provoked, at least in me, it provoked a sense of meaninglessness, a sense of depression, because the universe was just a big machine that was meaningless, for nothing, came out of nothing, going to nothing, you know, never to be repeated. That was my general view. So, the bad place, explore in your own life. Explore this archetype in your own life and ask yourself, have you ever been, or are you now, stuck in the bad place? And one of my favorite topics that I talk about is the toxic effect of the way technology is being used today. You know, take a walk down the street, look at all the little zombified people running around, well, not running around, walking around, staring down at their little screens in their feet, you know, walking on. People walking together, isolating themselves from each other. They're walking together, but they're isolated, staring at their little screens. Oh, stimulate me, stimulate me, stimulate me, please. You know, give me those dopamine hits, please. Saw something a couple of weeks ago. I was walking down the street towards my cousin's, and there was a woman in a car driving the whole way up the street with the phone in full view, hand on the steering wheel, phone in full view like this, glancing up and looking down at the phone. Oh, I just can't stay away from it, please. Stimulate me, stimulate me. Are you like that? Are you like that? You want to think about that, you know? Do you walk down the street staring at that stupid thing? You've got problems if you do, right? Your brain is being rewired by these, oh, I'm getting on a rant now, you know, the evil of Silicon Valley, right? The way they make money by harvesting your attention. I made a video a little while ago about how to take back, how potentially we could all take back our power from these people whose business model involves harvesting your attention. Wherever you are, your attention means their money through the advertising business model, right? It got so few views. There was one guy who made a computer program to put into practice what I was talking about in that video. I do owe you a video for that. I'm going to actually talk about your little program and share it with people. I've been meaning to do that. I haven't forgotten. But I was just so depressed by how little views that got. And it means you don't care. Most of you don't care, and you don't see it, and you're blind. But you know, we're all swimming in the bad place here. And here is a scary statement. And if you really think about it, I think you're going to agree that it's true. But it's darn scary, right? All your natural instincts have been weaponized against you, right? Every natural instinct that you have is potentially a source of money for somebody somewhere who can weaponize that against you, right? We've seen how it's done by harvesting your attention, by getting your brain to play tricks with dopamine, right? To give you pleasure, to get you keep coming back and back and back wherever you are, even if you're driving, right? They want you back and back and back. But look at food. You walk in and buy some food. You know, most of the stuff is laced with far more fat than it needs to be laced with, and far more sugar than it needs to be laced with, because they can make you buy it if they make it more attractive that way. They weaponize food against you, right? Look at the sexual instinct. Pornography is an example of sex being weaponized against you because it's intended for bonding with another person and making a family, right? Look what we've done to it. Everything, every natural instinct that is pleasant to us has been weaponized against us. So we are swimming in the bad place. And you will swim in it until you realize that you're swimming in it, right? So that's way more scary to me than any of these horror novels featuring these supernatural beasties, right? Real life is way more scary. Food for thought. All right, folks. Till next time, take care. The sky